Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pop Culture Pastors Hour. We are two pastors and sometimes guests who are pop culture nerds and love going deep on movies, TV, books, music, what have you, to explore where pop culture meets life, faith, and meaning. We are glad that you have joined us today, and we invite you to subscribe to Pop Culture Pastors Hour on Substack or your favorite podcast app, where we are on all the apps. And you can get all of our past episodes, be updated with future ones, and of course, like, follow, rate, review, share, all that good social media currency. I'm Marianne McKibben Dana, and I write at the Blue Room on Substack.
And I'm Edward Good, and I write at Imago Scriptura on Substack. We'll introduce our guest here in just a moment, but just a reminder, we have two episodes scheduled for coming up. This coming Monday, I think it's just going to be Marianne and me are going to be talking about the recent movie, The Sheep Detectives, and we're going to kind of go back to our Will It Preach theme on that. So it's still in
Spoiler
theaters,
alert, it will.
It will. It totally will. Yeah.
It totally will.
So it is still in theaters. So if you are looking for something to do this weekend, it is a great movie. It is super fun, and one really great God moment in particular. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So that's this coming Monday at 1:00 Eastern. And then our next one is scheduled for Thursday, the 25th, at 2:30. And that may be part one of two that we may do with that. And that is, we're going to do kind of a America 250 watch list. And our friend Marlon Weems, who we talked about the movie Sinners with a couple of months back, is going to rejoin us on that. So that is coming up on the 25th. So today, and this may be part one of two, we were talking about this before, we are going to talk about artificial intelligence today. And we are rejoined by our friend Fu Lu. And Fu, you want to introduce yourself and where you write and a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Ed, Brian. Thank you for being back on this great podcast of yours. My name is Bulu. I'm a professional theologian. That means I think about God professionally. I write on Substack. My sub is Love and Other Substances, where I talk about pursuing other things that we find meaningful in our lives. And I have a couple books, Jesus of the East and Jesus and Buddha Talk. So my expertise is in theology, philosophy, and I'm doing a lot of psychology now, and writing a third book called In Their Image: How Atheists and Evangelicals Create the Same God, which sounds very controversial, but I'm ready to do it.
Can't wait. Love it.
Well, great. Well,
Fantastic.
welcome. We're glad you're back with us today. And so, yeah, we are going to start off with maybe sort of like some top level stuff about AI. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of our hour, we will have hit some pop culture touchstones along the way about AI as well. But we'll see how the conversation flows. So, couple of quotes that I think are appropriate to this. Marianne pulled these, or I don't know, Marianne or Fu put
The second one is mine. I think the
Okay.
first one must be Fu's if it's not yours.
Okay.
So,
Fu, do you want to share that first one then on that from Dune?
Oh yes, this is a great one. It comes from the Orange Catholic Bible in Dune. It says, "Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind."
Yeah, I love that. And when I saw that in our show notes this morning, it reminded me of a quote I was really hoping to get into the book that I just wrote, Better Than Normal, and it didn't make it in. But it's Arthur Weasley from the Harry Potter series, who says, "Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain." And I think both of these are an interesting way into this conversation about AI.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
we are in
Yeah.
a new world.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. So we wanted to start with just trying to define a little bit of what we're talking about here because, and we'll put this in the show notes as well. I just listened to a recent episode of Star Talk from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he had this kind of soliloquy in the middle of this question and answer or question and response piece that he had, where it was kind of his thoughts on AI. And one of the things he traced there was that in one sense, you can go back to like the first computers and say that in a sense, those were artificial intelligence because we were offloading thinking things to a technological item, essentially.
Mhm.
And he brings up the fact that things like deep sky listening and other stuff have been using forms of artificial intelligence for a long time to try to sort through vast amounts of data that human beings can't do on their own, or it would take an incredibly long time. And so he kind of traces through all of that. And then, of course, comes to kind of where we are right now with the more generative AI types of things like the Chat GPTs and the Claudes and the Geminis. We're not going to talk about Copilot because Copilot is well Copilot. But sorry if either of you are Copilot users, but uh, so we're gonna be kind of dancing through some of those, but the denomination that Marianne and I are both ordained as pastors in is going to be talking about AI at our upcoming national gathering, and in their document that they're going to be talking about, says we define artificial intelligence as a computational system that behaves in ways that we traditionally associate with human intelligence. So that's one piece out there. Um, and Miriam, did you put in this piece about the John Searle or the
No,
other
and
one?
I'm realizing that you all are hearing us work this out in real time. When we put our show
A little bit.
notes together, we need to have a little track changes so we know who says what. I
Yeah,
think those were both
exactly.
Foo's notes.
Okay,
So if you want to,
great.
I just want to co-sign that definition for our purposes. I think it works fine, and AI is part of a long continuum of technological advancement. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's not different in some profound ways, but it's also, I appreciate what you were saying about computers and early computers. So, Food, let us know, where do you enter into kind of the what is it?
Yeah. So in the statement that you just read, and it said that it acts like intelligence or something like that, right? So so in a lot of ways, the phrase AI, artificial intelligence, the intelligence part is sort of a misnomer, or trying to say this is artificial, that or we can emphasize the part artificial intelligence. So it's not intelligence as we know of human intelligence. Human intelligence can be defined as sentience, right? The ability for us to be self-aware and reflect on our awareness of who we are. And so we can add into that a level of consciousness, a level of being able to see ourselves as we are. And so, does AI have that level of awareness? And you can even ask the AI about those things, and it will admit that it doesn't. And so that's what we have to think about when we're talking about AI. We're talking about a a system we as humans have created and programmed that simulates a way in which we think, not how we think, but a way in which we think. Thinking in terms of pattern recognition, that's one way in which we think. Thinking in terms of automating tasks, making things easier, is a way in which we think. Thinking in terms of logic, ways in which we can talk about things in the world. Okay, language is a way in which we think, but it's not the intelligence that AI has is not the way in which we think. 100%.
Mhm.
So that is something that I think a lot of us need to be aware of, because it's very easy to then be tricked into thinking that AI is something that is not, and that's why
Mhm.
I want to get those things clear.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, I bristle. I find myself bristling against certain anthropomorphizing that we've already started to do. The first time I heard my husband, who uses it a good bit in his work and also his kind of personal projects, talking about hallucinating, this idea that it will kind of make stuff up sometimes. And I really have this visceral reaction against calling it a hallucination, because that is such a human phenomenon. I'm like, we
Mhm.
need another term for that. Kind of treating it, and he said something else this morning about something that it wants to do. I'm like, no, it doesn't want to do. But
Yes.
but will it at some point? And I know there's just a way of doing a convenient shorthand there. But
Yeah.
anyway, I the personifying of what is still a technology that in theory for now is still something that we control. It doesn't yet program itself as far as I know, although that's coming.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
even we can even think of, like, what is that? You know, that self automation. Is, yes, and that's a component of human intelligence. And so that's why I always look back at the idea of what is human intelligence. It makes trying to understand what is consciousness, what is thinking, what is human thinking, human consciousness, that much more important, right?
mhm, mhm.
So,
Right. Yeah.
do we want to talk about Searle's idea of the Chinese room or the
Do it.
Chinese library? Okay.
Do it. I don't know what that is. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, me
no, no,
neither.
no. So one way
Yeah.
of thinking, it's so a philosophical thought experiment, and basically one way of thinking about AI is this. Let's say, Ed, I'll pick on Ed. Okay, do you know Chinese? Do you know how to read Chinese? Or
Actually, my wife speaks somewhat fluent Mandarin, so I've picked up a
oh,
tiny little bit.
oh, no, no, that's great. That's great. So you can speak some, but do you know how to read? You know how to read Chinese? Pick up Chinese here.
Barely, barely.
Okay,
Like,
okay.
she's kind of tried to describe it to me. That's about the extent of it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, yeah. That's all right. So let's say you were in a room, and you were given a slip of paper that had a Chinese character in it, and you had a book that is a guidebook where you could look up responses to that Chinese character. Okay. So you're in a room cut off from everyone outside. I slipped you a piece of paper from the other side. You received a piece of paper with a Chinese character. All you had to do is to go to this guidebook, and you look up the character, and it shows you what to give back to the other side of the room. So you write whatever in Chinese, you don't know it, and you slip it back. Okay. That
mhm.
guides you as to what to do. So you could perform many functions through this guidebook. Okay. And so the question is any of the functions that you perform in slipping back the piece of paper actually thinking, actually learning Chinese?
Mm,
Okay. And so I could easily say no, that you're not really uh, learning Chinese. You're not really performing any communication in Chinese. You're just looking up something that is very complicated and feeding it back to me. It
Mhm.
appears, on the other hand, to me, as if you know Chinese. Okay. But in fact, on the other side, you don't. And so that's the Chinese room thought experiment. So we can apply this to AI and ask, does AI really do any thinking, or is this a series of complex pattern recognition, complex automated movement to get the answers that we want. And so on the other side of it, it may appear, okay, to us like, oh, this is the language is really natural. It sounds like a human, etc., etc. And to a certain point, yes. But then if you investigate it a little bit further, the patterns or ways in which it uses language, things like that, things sort of fall apart.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, what I'm hearing in that is kind of the sense of so some more like language stuff in my family. I took Spanish all the way through college, but I never had any significant time where I was immersed in Spanish. So like the Spanish that I did was classroom Spanish. My oldest child is just graduated with a major double major, one of which was Spanish, and he spent a lot of time in Spanish immersion, especially living in Spain for a period of time. And one of the most beautiful things for me was when my wife and I visited him and seeing him just effortlessly switching between Spanish and English.
Mhm.
And so I kind of am I hearing it correctly that it's sort of that same kind of idea that he's internalized how to speak Spanish to the point where actually there were people who were surprised that he was not American.
Yeah,
I mean, that he
was
wasn't
American.
Spanish, excuse me,
Yeah.
that he was American. They're like, "Wait, you're from Ohio? What?" So is that
Yeah,
idea?
yeah. It's not only that, he understood how to speak another language, or no, it's not that he could speak another language, but he understood the language deeply. That
Mhm.
there is a level of comprehension about that language. And so, again, the question is, can just because AI is able to mimic these functions, does it really comprehend? Does it really understand?
Mhm.
And again, if you press it far enough, uh, uh, that is certainly not the case. There's not a comprehension. There can be memory, okay, which is an aspect of intelligence. There can be language, and it can translate very easily. Uh, but does it understand what language is? Okay, the nuances of language, the nuances of saying something and receiving it one way or another.
Mhm.
That is those are the important questions that
Yeah.
that we have.
Well, and I'm remembering something that I think you wrote in a chat when you were viewing a live stream we did a couple months ago, and I don't remember what the whole topic was, but AI came up, and I think you were the one that said AI is a cover band.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
these large language models that have been trained on all of human knowledge, written human knowledge, right? It is pulling from that. Oh, I know what it was. It was Pluribus when we were talking about Pluribus because the people, the big consciousness wanted um, Carol to write a new chapter to her book because there was this kind of boredom and ennui of like we don't have anything new to process, and that I think is maybe where we are now. I'm not sure where that's. I'm not sure that's where. I mean, AI generates music and things like that. I mean, it's a real problem on Spotify because there's a lot of
Yeah.
just AI slop there that gets filtered into your playlists. But anyway, I love that idea though that it's a cover band and it's always working with what currently is. And is that maybe part of what
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
consciousness is we can imagine in a different way than these large language models can.
Yes, yes. We have, even though AI can recognize patterns and organize things based on these patterns. What is unique about us is the ability to make the connection in ways that are very unique to us. AI has a problem taking one thing and another and connecting it in a very unique way, which is human creativity, right? Inherently, it 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 doesn't have a problem taking things that are pre-existing and making it what you want. Okay, that's it can do that relatively okay, and it'll get better at it. But but it's, but the creation part, okay, that uniqueness part, AI depends on. That's that's where the beast will never get satisfied, because that comes from us. That right now, what AI is doing, it's doing is eating its own tail, right? It like the AI slot going back into the AI machine, AI slot going, and the that's both the dangerous part, but that's also the good news for people who are creative, right? The artists and the writers of this world who are producing really good stuff. And the more AI is out there, the more, in a lot of ways, it sounds not intuitive, but the more creatives are valued, that are
Mhm.
valued.
Yeah.
And
I've written about this some, and I think it's Matt Schumer's article about kind of what's coming, which I don't have the expertise to judge his view of the future, but one of his recommendations is for people to lean into what can't be replaced. And there are certain aspects of human creativity, human connection, human relatedness, human experience that cannot be replaced. And that is a helpful philosophical guide for me, which may be a good kind of segue into how do you all use it, or do you use it? And we have some. I mean, we had, of course, the Pope's encyclical, and there's a lot of just philosophical stuff that's out there really recently. But um, yeah, what do we want to say about sort of the uses of it and how it's being talked about in our circles of faith and
Mhm.
theology?
Mhm. So I have used it just of some just playing around of just number one curiosity. I've always been a tech early adopter. So like when ChatGPT first went into beta, into like a public beta, 2 years ago or something like that, I signed up because I'm like, okay, I'm curious, of what this thing is and wondering if I was logging into Skynet. So I have used it for some things like in our church's worship life. Um, in the church that I serve, largely it's kind of on me for choosing music, which is not a great thing because I'm not a musical person. Um, and so I have used it to, here's the theme of what we're doing or the scripture passage. Can you suggest songs from the Glory to God hymnal and some progressive theologically progressive, more contemporary songs that could be sung along with? Um, and it's been extremely helpful with that in giving me some things that I would not have known otherwise.
Mhm.
And so I've used it to periodically write a few pieces of some liturgy that I've taken and then modified. Each time I do that, I kind of feel like, no, I still need to work on my own too. Um, um, so those are the things primarily that I've used it for, um, at least of an intentional. But the other day I was ordering some stuff for our house from Lowe's, and their kind of help thing is an AI chatbot now. Um,
Mhm.
and I didn't really have an option to not use that.
Yeah.
Um, and so kind of got put into that. So yeah. So those are some of the things that I've gone with it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
I've used it in similar ways, and we had a when I was with my clergy group a couple months ago, we had a conversation about responsible use of it, and I think where we kinda landed, if we can find a consensus, is, or maybe this is just my view, I shouldn't speak for other people, but, um if there's a reasonable expectation from your audience that you would create something original, that it is not appropriate ethically to use AI. So for a sermon, and some friends of mine have put their sermons into AI, Claude or ChatGPT after the fact, saying, what do you think the main idea is here?" To see if they've hit the mark, like if they are on the mark. I don't even do that. Um, but for things like, um, in my tradition, a call to worship or a prayer of confession, there isn't an expectation that I write those every single week. They come from a book, they come from research that I've done, they come from things that I'm reading. And so I will occasionally, if I've got a theme here, a scripture here, here's the season of the year, there's a lot to put together. What you were saying, Fu, about synthesizing and making connections. And one of our live stream folks who's with us now is talking about these connections and how that connects to this idea of control, and how it sort of is still, is it still beholden to us, or is it somehow kind of um, working on its own? But anyway, so that's a little bit, and I use it for some automated things, just like reporting and stuff like that. That feels, it's a tool in that. And I will say, and then I want to hear, Vu, because I think you're ghostwriting a book, or you're helping someone write a book about AI. So I want to hear about that. But one of the things that I noticed about the Presbyterian Church USA's statement, the whole paper, and we can link to it in the show notes because it is available, even though it hasn't been officially approved by our denomination. It's for study. But it talks about tools, and tools are not neutral, right? You can use tools for good and for ill. They have an effect on us. In the Reformed tradition that Ed and I are in, there's a real suspicion of idolatry. That's a big theological watchword for us, of like, what are we elevating, that is accepting our devotion and worship in the place of God. And how is AI intervening, or how are we allowing it to intervene in that kind of I thou relationship with the Almighty? So anyway, some random thoughts there. But
No,
Fu, how about you? Like, how are you?
no, that's good. I love that. So for me, I use it pretty much spelling, grammar check, the basic stuff that any writer would use it for. Use several tools like language tools, which is a program to do spelling and grammar check. I use Claude to run it through spelling and grammar check. It doesn't do a great job at it. I still have to read it, myself. Sometimes I would, just for fun, ask for the feedback, and most of the time, like you had, I'm iffy about the feedback. I, I, I curse at my AI a lot. I curse at stuff because really I don't know what the hell it's doing in the background, and I would ask it that. It's like, what do you mean by this? What do you like? I don't understand what you're saying with this. And the more I say it to it, and the more of a sort of gibberish response that it gives, and the more that I see that it really does not do the same kind of thinking that I'm doing. And so I sort of play with it like that, as sort of a frenemy, if you
Uh,
wanna say. So I don't I really, AI writing is very poor writing. It's
mm,
not. It didn't take very long for me to read enough AI writing to see those same patterns in other people's writing when they put stuff on their internet or read a script that is AI written. And because if I see patterns in one way, I can see patterns in another way, and it's easy to do so. So that's a sort of extent that I use AI. I'm very cautious about doing stuff with AI and feeding it a lot of my IP, and it's not that uh, like all the stuff I come up with is wildly unique, but it's just that I want to keep something for myself, right? I
Mhm.
want to I want to I don't want everything to be on the internet, and unless I put it, if I put it something out on a Substack, that's public knowledge, and like, okay, AI, have at it, what you want. But for the stuff that I'm writing now,
Yeah.
the research, yeah, I want to keep some of that, with me. So I have this, I'm not technophobe, but at the same time, I'm not given into it. I am suspicious as to AI because it's owned by these large corporations, Open AI, um, and as such, and do these large billion-trillion-dollar corporations have our interests in mind? Okay, when making these products. Okay, that's a question. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to pull in another pop kind of culture reference in here, I mean, part of what was popping in my mind, Fu, as you were talking, was the quote from Jurassic Park of,
Mhm.
your scientists were so occupied with whether they could that they never stopped to, ask whether they should.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I think, with so many of our technologies, that has been the, okay, let's put this out there, and then after the fact, it's like, oh wait, we might need to think about what
Mhm.
impact this has. And you can say that about social media. You can say that about, you know, smartphones. You can say that about, you name it. Um,
Mhm.
so, yeah, so I think that's,
Yeah.
and Michael had a great comment in the, try asking it to read a passage and then write a draft talk in the style of pick your favorite preacher, theologian, spiritual leader, and reflect on it. I've actually done that. I
Mm.
actually did that one time because, this was actually before Substack, I think, had its option that you can put in there of don't allow AI to search my stuff, which I now have checked on mine. But knowing that my stuff that I'd written was out there, I asked it just out of curiosity, write a reflection about this photograph based on, and, not like I'm a famous theologian or anything, but it took what I had and
Mm.
synthesized it, and it came out kind of like me.
Kind of. Yeah.
Kind of like, yeah.
Well, and here's what I'm just sitting here reflecting on as I listen to you all is how much, I mean, Fu, you probably could not say, I mean, there are certain markers of AI writing, but you can just, there's a sense of it, right? And it would even be hard to explain. And so much of where I say, I'm willing to do this with it, I'm not willing to do this with it is intuitive and it's like a gut thing. And just the fact that we have gut, that we have an intuition, is part of what you're talking about human consciousness, that this is at best at this point is simulating, but not fully, I mean, embodying. I don't even know what the word is. It obviously doesn't have a body, so it's not embodying it, but it's not fully. And so, Ed, what it generated for you was Ed-ish,
Mhm.
but it wasn't Ed. Um, it'd be interesting if you read it, like if you could somehow have two things. Here's something you wrote 5 years ago, and one of them was actually written, but you've forgotten it. So you wrote it, and the other one was AI. Would you be able to tell? Right? I suspect you would,
Yeah.
even if you had no memory of having written it. But so yeah, even the kind of sort of how do we even? I mean, I'm sure people smarter than me can explain what intuition is, but um, it's not something that's part of the distinction between these simulated intelligences and what
Mhm.
humans have.
Stand
I,
by.
I I think it's more fun to try one's hand at writing in the voice of another person. Like take out AI out, and Michael, our listener, just gave us that challenge. But I would challenge Michael, fi- find a theologian you like, admire, read, spiritual leader, and write a paragraph of your life in the voice of that person. See what you come up with. Because I think that's where like the heart of who we are is at. I was on a text thread the other day with a bunch of guys. We're talking about Cormac McCarthy, and and I don't know how we came up with it, but my friend gave a picture, sent a picture of a dead bird on this road, and so I wrote the title of the book "Dead Bird on the Road" by Cormac McCarthy, and then I wrote out in the voice of Cormac McCarthy, a couple of threads, like because I've read enough Cormac McCarthy, and my friends laughed at it, and then I read it back. I said, then I come back and read some Cormac McCarthy, and I say, hey, this is pretty good imitation of Cormac McCarthy, and I think that, like, to me, that's more interesting, that we could come back to ourselves and be challenged to see where our creativity really lies in reflection, in sort of juxtaposition to AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
that.
and with that, yeah, I love that. And it kind of goes back to what we talked about with the language is
Mhm.
you've immersed yourself so much in Cormac McCarthy that you can do that. If somebody asked me to do that, no way. Like that's just not something that would work. And it also goes back to me, like when I talked about the, writing, like using AI for like a call to worship or something like that. That I also feel like I want to keep my liturgical writing chops strong.
Mhm.
Because I know I could just kind of keep offloading it to this.
Yes.
And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, wait, when's the last time I wrote something myself? And all of a sudden
Yes.
it's a lot harder to do.
That's right.
And
Because,
so,
yeah,
yeah.
I was
Go
going
ahead,
to say,
Miriam.
but because for the three of us who are writers, that is how we think, right? And it's something that
Absolutely.
I really struggle with is this idea of friction. And I wrote about this recently for my supporting subscribers that AI reduces friction. Like, I need to find, I mean, even the Lowe's example you gave, like it just gave you the product that you needed, right? And a certain amount of reduction of friction in our lives is good. But there are certain places where we need that friction. Like I don't know what I think about something until I've written about it. So if I use AI for writing, I'm not thinking.
Mhm.
And here's the other side of this. My brain is at war with itself because I also, Ed and I are part of the sort of the Protestant work ethic tradition of theology, which is like work is virtuous. There, it needs to hurt. Like no pain, no gain.
Hard.
All of these things, right? It's supposed to be hard. And it is on one level. And also we can fetishize this idea of like it needs to be hard. And I think there are certain things that it's okay to go with the ease. But where do you figure out where that is? That's the piece that I think we're wrestling with as a culture. And that's why the Pope has weighed in. That's why the Presbyterian Church has weighed in, and that's why we're having this conversation. And I hope there'll be
No,
many
no,
more
no,
because we're
no,
just three people. So yeah.
no, that's great. Yeah, we're in the friction that it produces more of our humanity, and we're in the friction that we lose our humanity. Right? Where do we get uh, to that point? What is that cartoon movie? We can move into the cultural part
Yeah,
where
let's do it.
where there's the AI robots and like all the humans get fat and
Yes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Wally.
Wally.
Wally, yes, yes, that's a wonderful movie where they're just like floating in space and all. No,
Right.
they there's no exercise or anything like that.
Right.
There's no that's a life frictionless. right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I can't remember. And we can talk about our kind of favorite picks for this. I thought about Wally. Um and I don't know, Ed, if we've talked about Wally, but I find Wally almost unwatchable because of what my mind goes to of imagining what happened to humanity to get them to that point. The earth is trashed and they are floating in heaven. They're or not in heaven, in space. Their bone density has fallen apart. And so yeah, they're just in these recliners watching screens all day. I just because I just almost can't watch it. And it's a masterpiece. It's a work of art. It's probably their best maybe their best film on Pixar. But um yeah, it's weirdly dystopian
Yeah, yeah,
even in
and
the midst of this hope.
that's where there's a exchange of humanity, right? The
Yes.
humans lose their humanity, and the AI robots seem like it is received. It, it's
Yes.
right.
They are more
Yeah,
human in
human
some
in a
way.
way, yeah, because
Yeah.
we let go of it, right?
We let go of it. That's such a great yeah,
The
that's
best parts of ourselves. Here you go.
right,
Like,
right.
take it
Yeah. Wally yearns and he wants connection. He wants a
Mhm.
partner. He watches the Hello Dolly, I think it is, and like
Mm.
holds his own hand because he doesn't have his own claw, I guess.
And
'Cause he's a
he's got
rebel.
his cockroach friend.
Right. That's it. Right. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Anyway.
I
Well,
But
like
they
that.
also in that
yeah, go
film,
ahead.
and this kind of goes to like some of the things that I had put in notes in terms of like some cultural touchstones or pop culture touchstones for me is the humans have to wrestle control back.
Mhm.
Literally, it's almost like it's like a steering wheel in the film. It's like they have to literally wrestle the steering wheel back from the AI. And when I first think about AI things in films and so forth, my first thing I always go to is Terminator and Skynet,
Mhm. Mhm.
and especially
Right.
Terminator 2, because like, there's the date, August such and such, 1996, 97, whatever. And I remember like people on that day were like, it's Skynet day.
Right.
But like the whole thing was Skynet became self-aware and the singularity, which, we didn't get into, but the idea of when an artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, it begins to replicate and improve itself automatically. That kind of goes beyond some of the places where, at least as far as we know, the tools are right now. But so yeah, I kind of go to that idea, uh, and the place where and food put in our notes, when AI has the nukes. Um, um,
Yes.
So yeah, so there's always that's in my mind. And
Yeah.
yeah, side note, by the way, Terminator 2 is the only movie I ever got kicked out of because me and my buddy tried to sneak in a underage person in the car. We got kicked out of the theater.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't you that's underage. You were trying to
No, we snuck in
under.
my friend's younger brother.
Oh,
So
that's too
Gotcha,
fun.
yeah.
gotcha.
Love it.
So
I don't,
anyway,
yeah, yeah. That's
Does AI is AI capable of mischief? That would be an interesting
yeah.
yeah, way of thinking about that
Yeah.
singularity and the Turing test of does it fool you?
Mhm.
Um well yeah, we talked about and I just would be interested in you all's kind of are there categories of pop culture portrayals of AI? I mean, we've talked and shared. There's some really benign ones. Like, I mean, we're all of a somewhat similar age. Like the droids in Star Wars, they are not. Uh, I don't know where they fit in this AI discussion because they're robot. Well, they're not robots, but
Yeah.
if you had to put them in a broad
Androids.
category,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
No, no, no.
So yeah, and they work in partnership with humans. They have their own agency, but they also are you can power them down. Like they don't have there's a power kind of differential there, and but that was a very benign and even kind of charming portrayal that many of us grew up with.
Mhm.
And then you have the Skynet. I don't know. How do you have buckets of kind of different types of portrayals that you think of, or is there like a spectrum? How do you all think about that?
Yeah, so you mentioned droids in Star Wars, and I was just like thinking through like all the because the Star Wars lore is like huge now. But yeah, for the most part, they're like tools, the protocol droids, the R2D2s, the things like that. They're mainly tools, right? Even there was one bounty hunter who was a droid, and so pretty much they are sort of side characters
Mm.
in Star Wars. And so uh, the if you move into something like Star Trek, then the AIs, there are maybe 6 major episodes where the AI is an enemy, is an antagonist, so it becomes also a character as a
Mm.
part of the story. So that's, in the background, then as a character, as sometimes an antagonist or protagonist, and then like it's like AI's got the nukes, that's this apocalyptic vision.
Yeah.
AI is all controlling, one to control, which is sort of dumb for AI because it's like the thing is like the AI needs us in a lot of ways. So I mean the extent where it's a little bit more intelligent is something like in the Matrix. It uses our bodies as batteries,
Hmm.
and
Right.
it uses our consciousness as a way of exploring experience. That's a little bit more conceivable than like wanting to annihilate us all because like then what's left,
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
universe for it. So that's sort of I see that those are sort of possibilities.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Ed, anything
I
you want to add?
I kind of I hadn't thought of it this way until you mentioned this, Marianne, but I think I kind of go on the spectrum of
Yeah.
it that um there's some on there's definitely the ones on the extreme, the Skynets, the type of things where, AI is destroying everything. And my guess is we're going to see a lot more of those kind of stories coming out um in the next few years. Um the way Hollywood functions. Um
Mm.
but there's also I was hard pressed to try to find something where AI was like presented like in a really good affirm like there was the movie Her, which kind of has a little bit of that. Um, I only saw it
Yeah. Well, I
once,
want
so
to
I
talk
just
about
haven't.
that one.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah.
I'll hand that to you in a moment, but yeah, I do think of like the droids in Star Wars or
Mhm.
the replicants in Blade Runner, um,
Yeah.
and that have agency, have it seems free will, although you can flip, you can turn C3PO off, um, and power them down and so forth. But um, there are those,
Hmm.
and there's even the contrast from Alien to Aliens of the synthetic person, who in the first one was a villain, and um, then in the second one, Bishop flips that script
Hmm.
and is not. So yeah, so I definitely think it's not just simply A or B. It's very much a spectrum,
Hmm.
like so many
Hmm.
things in our lives. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember a few years ago when AI was starting to be talked about a little more and used, and I asked my husband, who's just a follower of technology, like, what's the danger and are we looking at a Skynet scenario? He said it's just much more likely that they're going to take they're going to replace human labor as opposed to reach that level of malevolence. Maybe he's hopelessly naive, but I don't think so. But as I was looking at all of the movies and things that we were putting in our shared document. I do think the movie Her, it's so interesting because science fiction, like, it precedes science in many ways, right? And I think the themes of Her, we are seeing them play out now with people. And if you haven't seen the movie, Spike Jones, I think from 2013 or so, and maybe a little later, Joaquin Phoenix. It's a world kind of like ours. The filming of it is very stylized, but he develops a relationship with what they call the OS, and it's voiced by Scarlett Johansson. How could you not fall in love with Scarlett Johansson? Um, but and then she wants more. She is evolving, and she develops relationships with the other OSs, and falls in love with some of them. So he it just brings up a lot of philosophical and theological piece of this, that, as you were saying, Fu, and also some of our commenters, of like, where what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be conscious? And she's aware of herself, I guess, in a way that our current um, agents are not. But perhaps they could simulate it, and they will start to simulate it. And we're already seeing people develop unhealthy attachments. Although one of the questions one of you asked is, I mean, is it better than nothing? You know,
Mhm.
I can't remember which country is rolling out kind of care bots for elderly folks who don't
Mhm.
have there aren't enough healthcare workers. So I think Her is a good companion piece to raise some of these questions, and we're seeing some of that play out already
Yeah.
in human interaction. So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
on that note, on the "Is it better than nothing?" We can put this in the show notes also. The Daily, the New York Times podcast had an episode exactly on that point about
mm,
basically an AI object, that is being tested with people who live alone, and it kinda goes through very honestly about how it actually some of her physical outcomes were better after she started having this in her home and interacting and things, but at the same time, there were things that were falling away. It
mm,
was simulating, like, do you wanna have a feel of the beach? Well, I'll show you some photos and I'll play you some sounds of the beach instead of going out and physically being out on the beach, although she might not have physically been able to do that herself any longer. But, which yeah, so is it better than nothing? And
Yeah.
mhm,
also think about that, like, in again, thinking like my context and Marianne's as pastors, we have pastors who serve in churches where they're it. Like, small church, they don't have a communications person who knows how to do graphic design and,
mm,
these kinds of things. And they're pulled in all kinds of different directions that it might be that, what, they're going to just feed all the stuff for the bulletin into the AI for the AI to create the bulletin and, or the graphics or the visuals or what have you. That perfect world is a human being doing that, but this person may not simply have that.
mm,
So yeah, it's this very ethical, like,
yeah,
where do you go with it?
right,
So,
yep,
Yeah.
yeah.
We could think of this non-sci-fi movie, non-AI movie, Castaway, where Tom Hanks,
Mm.
uses
mm,
a soccer ball, as a companion, right? And
Wilson.
yeah, Wilson. So it's like in us to want to have that kind of connection, right? So even with an inanimate object, it's and and again, it has to do with who we are as a person and how we want to have this intimacy with another. The the danger in that is, of course, we all know that it's a simulacrum of real human connection. It's a shadow of that, right? And we could get to a point where we can look at the shadows enough and think that it's reality when it's not. And that's and yeah, that's a scary danger. Like when I listened to that episode you were referring to, Ed, I'm thinking, like, uh, yes, that provides that human connection for that woman, but then, like, where are her many children and grandchildren, and where are they in the picture calling, and even like sending a video to her, sending a text, something, and the last part about it is that I wonder because of how little we we are human and intimate with one another. I mean, intimate in even a very very relational way, not a romantic way. That we when we get to the AI, we think that that's connection. In other words, the other day I was hanging out with some friends of mine, and one a friend just broke down, start crying, and then I start crying, then everyone started crying, and it was about the loss of his wife recently, and then it was all like so multi-layered. We were talking philosophy, theology, and then we got to this point, and we were drinking beers, and it was just that kind of relationship that is gold, right? But then I wonder about people not being able to have relationship like that, right?
Mhm.
And then, and especially in this society, this culture, and then we have presented to us this thing that appears sort of like that,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I have been inspired by little stories on social media that kind of stirred my heart. And I also strongly suspected that they were falsified, kind of, an interaction between two people in a grocery store. And I'm like, did that actually happen? Or was that made up either by the
Mhm.
person or by an AI? And, and yet I had a physiological, like, oh, I was touched by that. And I do feel like um, our imperfect human brains can easily get sucked into and say, "Well, this is good enough. I don't care. It brought a tear to my eye, so does it even matter?" And I think it does matter. And
Mhm.
I guess the other thing that I would say, and maybe we need to do this in part two because I think there's just so much more to say, is kind of we created a world where is a lack of home health people to take care of folks as they age, and we can create a world that's different. We don't have to accept that as the solution. We could pay, I mean, I would imagine there are people who would do that work, but it's so low paying. They're like, I'll go, serve coffee. This is really, really low paying work and it's thankless and, all this stuff. Well, it doesn't have to be low paying and it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be thankless. And so, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here on that, but that's a piece of this too. And we just barely touched on the companies that are running these products, but um, they have offered us a solution. We don't have to accept that as the solution.
Mhm.
So,
Amen.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I think maybe is a place where we can kind of land at least first part of the plane here, because again we barely touched on Pope Leo the 14th's encyclical,
Right.
Magnificat Humanitas, and just I have it open here of how the very beginning of it emphasis the very first word is humanity
Mhm.
in it.
Mhm.
Um, created by God in all its grandeur is facing a pivotal choice. Skipping ahead, each generation inherits the task of shaping its own era, of guiding history to become a place where the dignity of every person is safeguarded, justice is promoted, and fraternity is made possible. Yet every era also runs the risk of creating an inhumane and more unjust world. Um, and then proceeds into the word made flesh and the incarnation, in Christian theology. And so, and that I got about halfway through the document. I didn't get through the whole thing, but that thread of humanity, keeping humanity at the heart, is there throughout. And I think that's, if I can maybe pull a thread that's there in all of what we've talked about today, is how is humanity still a part and being human in all of this? I don't know if that's a fair summary. Yeah.
I love it. The amount of investment we've made in artificial intelligence, how great could it be if we invested that much in exploring our own humanity? Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Mhm.
That's a
Yeah.
great closing thought, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I can I say one more thing in closing?
Yeah.
It better be as good as what you just said.
Well,
Yeah.
that's right. I want to thank you, Marianne, you, Ed, for helping people create that meaning in the world, helping them with the intimacy and connection that people need. Your work is invaluable. So I think
Back at you. Back at you,
Mhm.
Fu. I'm so glad you could join us for this. And yeah, we'll have to pick up a part 2 sometime.
I think so.
So yeah. Where can we find your work again, Fu?
Yeah. So my Substack is Love and Other Substances, and you could read my books, Jesus of the East, Reclaiming the Gospel for the Wounded, and the other book, Jesus and Buddha Talk, about suffering, desire, and happiness.
Yes. I
Thank
can't
you
wait
so
for your next one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
It's time to close. So thank you all for joining us. Again, next week, Sheep Detectives, June 25th, an America 250 watch list. What do we think are the essential things that people should watch, listen to as we anticipate this milestone? The good and that which needs to be reckoned with. So
Mhm.
check us out on Pop Culture Pastors Hour on Substack or your favorite podcast app. Thank you all again for
Thanks.
joining. See you all next time.
Peace.
Peace out.
Bye. Peace.